Well, Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba will deliver his first midterm budget policy statement today. The mini-budget does not provide exact allocations, but it does set out government spending priorities for the next 3 years. Rating agencies will be paying close attention to the minister's speech. South Africa has already been downgraded to junk status, and they've warned government that they want to see policy that supports fiscal strength and stability. Today's speech is expected to give direction on plans to deal with declining revenues and dysfunctional state-owned enterprises. Well, for more on what to expect from the budget this afternoon, we cross back to Devan Morgan at Parliament. And Devan, it remains to be seen whether or not the Finance Minister will continue along the path of prudence like his predecessors.
Indeed, Natasha. Thanks very much once again here in Parliament ahead of that medium-term budget policy statement by the newly promoted Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba. Now, one of the groupings that will be watching this very carefully, Business Leadership South Africa, Sizwe Mbele, joins me now from that grouping. Sizwe, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. I mean, time and time again this year, Business Leadership South Africa has been talking about this trust deficit that appears to be widening between business and government, represented by the Finance Minister in many instances. What are you expecting this afternoon? I mean, clearly, if you look at some of the commentary, many of the commentators say there is no rabbit to pull out of the hat. Are you a bit more optimistic?
Yeah, Devan, thanks very much for inviting us. I think the context is very important to Business Leadership South Africa. We want to play a much more constructive role with the government, specifically with the Ministry of Finance, and then of course the public enterprise. But the context is different. Everyone knows about the state capture that Business Leadership South Africa has been calling for and said we've got to root it out, and corruption. And specifically when one talks about the Finance Minister with his plan that he presented in July, there is a trust deficit there because of his history and the allegation that surrounds it. So this is a great opportunity for the Minister of Finance to say that he wants to repair that. He can do a number of things. In the view of Business Leadership South Africa, is that he's got to come out and say that he wants to condemn and root out corruption. And that's the call of the Business Leadership South Africa. And
he's got to do that, Sizwe, if I can interrupt. He's got to do that with a certain state of or sense of astuteness. There's got to be an unambiguous stance, as you said before. So in that regard, what are some of the messages you're hoping to hear from him that would demonstrate that commitment?
Well, the first one that I would actually expect from him is to say that he's halting the nuclear program, because we cannot afford. It seems like a century ago when our debt to GDP was about 28%, now it's 48%. And if one adds the government, the SOE guarantees, we are on the wrong side of the prudential limit of 60%. So can you imagine if Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba were to say that he's halting the nuclear program? Can you imagine if he says that he's professionalizing the state-owned enterprises? And those are the things that the investors and certainly my constituents will be looking for, to say that he's visibly demonstrating that he's serious about rooting out the corruption, and he's putting the confidence back. That deficit, it involves a number of things of stop, not start, because you can actually come up with a number of things and say, I'm starting, I'll continue and stop. And we're saying that for that trust deficit, this is a great opportunity. He's got to seize the opportunity, call out the road, call out the corruption, state capture. He says, I'm still halting the nuclear program. Those are the things that we want.
You look at confidence from the business community down to 33-year lows by an index that SABC, the business chamber, releases on a monthly level. I think it's yeah, as I said, lowest in 33 years. Does business also have to be a little bit more relaxed in terms of playing its role in making this economy active? I mean, surely the trust deficit involves two players here, business and government. Are you certain that you as business is doing enough to actually stimulate the economy? I believe there's hordes of cash that is being kept by business. Are you doing enough to actually play a part in that stimulation?
Two things that we've made it very clear we commissioned a study whereby we demonstrated independent study, we demonstrated that this idea that business is sitting on cash, it's a fallacy. It's not true. It's false. A number of our members, they are dollarized in terms of the asset that they do. So we demonstrated that the cash that they actually hold, especially in times like this, it's actually insignificant. So it's not true. But I want to draw your attention to the fact that business leadership, on the 23rd of August, they signed a contract with South Africa where they committed to growing inclusive growth and rooting out the corruption. Now, business leadership South Africa has always said that we welcome the involvement by government because it's a critical stakeholder. We cannot create jobs without the government. But they've got to be much more receptive. Fundamental things need to change. Protection of state institutions, it's key because you've got to have that foundation in order to grow. Let me give you some numbers so that I can illustrate the point, as these numbers cannot be disputed. In the past 3 years, the economy has been growing at about 1%. Structurally, on average, our economy should be growing at about 3.5%. That can actually add about 100 billion South African rand. 30% of that is going to tax. Now, if you imagine that the growth of about 5.4% or even 6%, easily you close that fiscal gap that you'll be seeing today, which we expected to be above 50 billion. So business is doing something about it. And we have welcomed the Minister of Finance to say that, even the government, to say that we want to play a much more meaningful role, not only by providing answers, but by providing the human capital when it comes to governance, by providing human capital when it comes to professionals who can do this thing, because we don't want to dictate to him.
Mbele, final question, Sizwe. If you look at the possibility that taxes may rise and you might get hints to tax increases, you look at the possibility of new taxes, what does this mean for the business environment? Because, I mean, taxes work up to a point where you can get revenue, but then you constrain the economy. Any particular perspective this afternoon on where taxes should go?
Certainly. Let me just put this way. Business have always been saying that structurally South African corporate tax should be at about 25%, but we've been able to counterbalance that at about 28%. Therefore, we don't expect any tax breaks. So we've counterbalanced higher taxes. That's the first thing. But certainly you cannot continue to finance bad habit. You can collect as much as you like, but there is a leakage, some inefficiencies. We've got to make sure that you arrest those leakages. That's the first thing. So the question of increasing tax, you can do a number of things there, but we've got to make sure that the fundamentals in terms of arresting the leakages and rooting out corruption, which we've been calling for. The business leadership has been forefront. Bonang Mohale made this observation. He says that since 1999 up until now, we've bailed out SAA at a tune of about 49 to 50 billion. And he made this key observation. With that amount of money, we could have bought Emirates. So South Africans, not only businesses, are tax fatigued, but you cannot continue to finance the bad habits. Let me give you two examples. Our ministries in terms of education and finance, those are the highest spending, higher than the average in middle-income countries. But if you look at the result, they don't come close to that. So the key issue here is that let's make sure that our fundamentals are okay, and business is willing. They want to play a much more constructive role in terms of providing that kind of support, that role in terms of providing meaningful solutions, but government needs to come to the party.
All right, we'll leave it there. Sizwe Mbele from Business Leadership South Africa, and that's where we leave it for now. In just a few hours' time, around about 2 o'clock, rather 1.5 hours if my time is correct, to actually go into the plenary and find out exactly what this new Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba has on the table as far as the medium-term budget is concerned. We're bringing you that address live here on SABC.
Devan, thank you very much for that. Our Devan Morgan live from Parliament ahead of that budget.